It's Sunday, Austin. Welcome to Living Wealthy Radio with your host, Teresa Kuhn.
Good afternoon. You are listening to Living Wealthy Radio, heard every Sunday at noon here on Talk Radio 1370 AM, streaming live at talk1370.com. I am Teresa Kuhn, helping you live wealthier. Resources are available for you at livingwealthyradio.com. A sacred cow is an idea, custom, or institution that is unreasonably held to be above criticism. What are some sacred cows you can think of? Well, conventional financial planning is a huge one for me. From the way we are taught to save for retirement to how we send our kids to college. There are many sacred cows when it comes to money and wealth creation. Our guest today, Charles-Hugh-Smith, is a modern Renaissance man, a blogger, author, TV and radio commentator, fitness, health, and lifestyle expert, oh my gosh, and also vocal proponent of America's return to self-sufficiency and sustainability. His blog, Of Two Minds, was named one of the most influential alternative financial sites by CNBC. And Of Two Minds covers an eclectic assortment of topics, including personal finance, energy, education, and genetically modified food. He's written many books dissecting sacred cows, including Why Things Are Falling Apart and What We Can Do About It, Resistance, Revolution, and Liberation, a model for positive change, Survival Plus, Structuring Prosperity for Yourself and the Nation, and an unconventional guide to investing in troubled times. His most recent book, The Nearly Free University and the Emerging Economy, The Revolution in Higher Education, tackles one of America's most sacred cows, the idea that everyone needs to take on debt and get a college education. And Charles, I could not agree with you more as a financial advisor and wealth and retirement income strategist. I see my clients every single day take on this huge amount of debt for their children and see their children's taking a huge amount of debt just for that sacred for-college degree. Where have we gone, wrong?
Well, Teresa, I think that's an excellent question, and I think we can start with the foundation of our current educational system has just fallen completely behind our technology. When we think of universities stretching back into the medieval and Renaissance eras, they were all based on a tremendous scarcity of knowledge and printed material. Books were very expensive, and if you wanted to learn something, there were very few opportunities. And so the universities were based on libraries where there were scarce books and scarce experts who you'd have to gather in one spot to hear their lectures. And now with the internet and online courses, that whole model is just really obsolete.
You make a really good point. So you would think that the cost of education would go down because there's so much available information and education out there, but the opposite is happening every single day. The cost of education is going up and not down.
Right, and that's another point that I think we tend to overlook is that the current system is based on what I call artificial scarcity. In other words, there's really no constraint on the number of people who could take college classes online and earn a credential or degree. But the current system creates an artificial scarcity. Like you have to apply, and a lot of people get rejected, and so with a scarcity, then they're able to push the price above what the market would normally allow. And so this is what I call cartel pricing. And of course, that's common in economies around the world. When one or two companies dominate a market, then they can charge a price that's way above what the price would be if there was competition. So what I'm sort of proposing as a solution is let technology guide us to make college affordable, and let's have some real competition instead of this sort of fake competition we have between colleges that charge $29,000 per year tuition and $32,000. That's not real competition.
Is the cost really that much for a university? Right? Are they really for someone to go to school? Is it realistic to think that the cost to educate that student is $30,000 a year, or $20,000 a year, or $40,000 a year?
Yeah, Teresa, the statistics vary, of course, depending on if you go to a private university or a state university. And, of course, the state institutions will be cheaper, but the average cost for a 4-year bachelor's degree is running somewhere between $89,000 and $120,000 on average. And, of course, that includes living expenses, which if you live at home, of course, and attend a state university, your costs will be considerably cheaper than if you go to an out-of-state school and pay full private tuition. But the costs have, on average, the cost of tuition and student fees has risen 1,100% since 1980. So that's roughly, in roughly 30 years, the costs have skyrocketed over 1,000%, where the cost of buying a new car has risen 95%. So, as one example, so you can see that the college fees and tuition have risen roughly 10 or 11 times more than the rest of the economy.
But is it based on the college having to, costing more from the college perspective to educate a student, or is it just inflated because of, financial aid and there being money available for students to pay the colleges, and the concept of the cartel with the universities getting together and not overtly, but, charging pretty much the same as everybody else?
I think we can pinpoint one cause, which is that when the money is available for any particular purpose in unlimited quantities, then the price will rise. And with the advent of student loans, then there's basically an unlimited amount of money that is being diverted to higher education in the form of student loans, which now total over $1 trillion. And so if we had to pay cash only, if there were no student loans, then we can imagine what would happen to price. Price would collapse, along with a lot of really high-priced institutions that weren't really providing a good product. And that's the other aspect of this that's really troubling is the current system of higher education is not providing a quality product. And I know that's an astonishing claim, perhaps, but one of the largest studies of college students and their academic achievements was called Academically Adrift. And it found that a full third of all college students gained no critical thinking skills at all. And another third had marginal improvements in the skills that we need in the current economy. So it seems fairly obvious that the current system is failing roughly 2/3 of everybody that goes to college. So on top of soaring costs, the quality or viability of the educational product they're providing has declined.
Wow, that's very interesting. 2/3 of those that go to college and take on a tremendous amount of debt, their critical thinking skills has not improved or has improved just marginally.
Right. And so there's been quite a bit of study, and in fact an explosion of study of how well online courses work. And the catchphrase out there now is MOOC, which is an acronym, MOOC, which is Massively Open Online Courses. And so a lot of higher education colleges, both state and private, they're starting to work these into their curriculum because they're so effective. And actually students learn better and learn more material by doing an online course than they do in a lecture. And of course, the cost is essentially zero. It's the cost of the bandwidth, which is almost zero. But ironically, perhaps, for those of us on the outside, the current system is charging the same money for this essentially free course as they do for the lecture course, with a classroom and a high-cost professor or instructor and so on. So the model is nearly free to deliver, but the current institutions are charging the same old price, tens of thousands of dollars for a degree, even if you earn it online.
What about the online alternatives that are promising degrees but at a lower cost?
That is one of the more hopeful signs, is that some institutions are breaking rank, so to speak, with the institutions of higher learning in general, and charging a price that's more in line with the actual delivery price of the product. And one of the examples that's gotten quite a bit of publicity is, I believe it's the Georgia Tech has come out with a master's degree in computer science program, which is entirely online, and I believe they're charging $6,700, or it might be $8,700, but less than $10,000 for the entire master's degree program. And the competition, so to speak, if you attend a classroom equivalent, it's in the tens of thousands. So that's kind of a sign of where we could go, and it may very well be that the delivery cost of the entire program, including testing and everything, might be more like $4,000. And so what I'm looking at is the potential to drop the cost of a college education by an order of magnitude, like by tenfold. In other words, if it costs $10,000 now for a semester, it should cost $1,000. If the whole degree program costs $100,000, it should cost $10,000. And so the Georgia Tech program is showing that this is not just fantasy; it's a real possibility.
So, if a student were to get a master's degree online through Georgia Tech, or with any one of these other universities that may be accredited, is there a stigma attached to that degree when they go to find a job?
Well, that's part of the developing sort of ethos of this online course alternative, Teresa. That's still an open question. If the program is properly organized and the student is properly educated on the material and properly tested, I don't see any reason why there would be a stigma. And so that sort of raises another critical point in the future of higher education, which is, I think we need to move to a system that accredits the student, not the college. And as it is now, the study that we mentioned, Academically Adrift, it's clear that just accumulating credits in some college, be it a physical campus or an online university, it doesn't really tell a potential employer or collaborator whether you've actually mastered the material. And so we need to go to a system that's common in the professions, like, say, being an attorney or an architect. You typically get your degree, but then you have to pass a professional test to actually gain the right to practice in the real world. Why not do that for every student in every field? And that's certainly, again, very possible with the explosion of online software. Everyone could be tested in their field of study and show potential employers, hey, I really know this stuff.
That's an interesting concept. Instead of accrediting the universities, accredit the students. And in many professions like accountancy and lawyers and doctors, they have to be, they have to pass their boards or have to pass their exams. And, regardless of where they went to school, at least they're in line with their peers.
Right. And that raises another point that, in terms of our peers, is, as you know, and I know you've covered in previous shows, the U.S. economy is struggling with income disparity. That we're finding that a lot of the jobs that are available are lower pay. than they were a generation ago, and the top performers in various fields are earning way more than they used to a generation ago. And so I think that we need to tie in reforming higher education with income disparity. And if we keep college being basically unaffordable and extremely expensive, where you have to become a debt serf for like 10, 20 years as you slog away paying down tens of thousands of dollars of debt, that's actually increasing income disparity greatly because it's limiting the opportunity to go to college, and it's making it so expensive that lower income students, it's like they really can't pay this thing off if they get a conventional job at a conventional pay scale. So in the nearly free university model, the university costs drop to $5,000-$10,000 for the entire degree. And so you don't need student debt necessarily. And then since the student is tested directly, then you can go to potential employers and say, see, I really have evidence that I know this stuff. And so I think that reforming higher education is one really solid way to start addressing the root causes of income disparity.
So the whole question of, how did we get to this point, right? To me, there's so many different areas of our economy and finance and our culture today that you mentioned the word serfdom, right? When these kids graduate from college, they've got tens of thousands of dollars in debt. They are serfs, right? They've got a master, and the master is who they owe the debt to. Many of of these professions, their licenses are linked to whether they pay their debt or not. So if they default on their debt, their credit is ruined. They can't file for bankruptcy and erase that debt. Some professions, they can't get their license to practice their profession, right? So they really are slaves to the master. But at the same time, the economy is down. We've got employers today that are laying off massive amount of employees because of Obamacare. We've got like this perfect storm of things happening in the economy that if I was a student graduating from college with, $70,000, $80,000 worth of debt, I would be pretty upset.
Yes, and I think that we may be seeing the first sort of tentative signs of the younger generation starting to rebel at this system. And unfortunately, the choices at the moment are not good. In other words, we don't yet have a fully online system that accredits the student. That's still a dream, if you will. What we have is a cartel system that charges you a huge fortune for a nearly worthless or often worthless degree. And so students have this sort of dreadful choice where they can avoid college and decide to learn something that's productive in the real economy and master that, and then go seek an employer who will give them a chance. And this is not as uncommon as maybe we're led to believe. And for example, Google is a company that many young, hotshots in technology would love to work for. And it turns out that many of the teams at Google 15% of the people have zero college experience. Zero. They didn't attend part-time. They didn't take some classes. Zero. And this as results from Google studying the productivity and collaborative abilities of people that did really well in academic studies. They graduated with 4.0 or honors and all that stuff. Well, Google found that the people they hired with that had succeeded in academic studies, they were no better employees in terms of productivity than people with no college. And so, as a result, Google started to hire people with no college, as long as they knew their stuff, as long as they could solve the problems Google needed solving. So that is, of course, heresy in the current system that requires everyone to get a 4-year bachelor's degree to even get in the door. But I think it goes to show that the really enlightened employers are starting to move away from looking at college degrees as the essential component of productivity. And they're starting to look at, like, what does the person really know how to do?
So why do you think our culture is so is willing, with all the financial education that's out there, right? And there's tons of it. And a lot of it is based on, hey, don't get into debt, right? But we make the exception with college. With college, it's okay to, have financial aid and get student loans, and the kids are getting the student loans, and the parents are getting student loans. Is it because our parents or our thinking is this is the only way to have success? This is the only way for you to have, Johnny, for you to have, a better life than what we as parents had? Is that thinking behind that, Dad?
I think so, Teresa, and I think that the post-war history supports that basis, and so it's very difficult for us as a culture to realize that what worked from 1945, the end of World War II, to, say, the early 90s or maybe even mid-90s, that 50-year period, that what worked then no longer works now. In other words, in a more entrepreneurial economy, one that requires critical thinking and the ability to be flexible and learn new skills all the time, that just going to college and getting a degree is no longer enough. And but we have, like, decades of experience where just getting a bachelor's degree got you into the opportunity to apply to all kinds of much better paying jobs than if you only had a high school diploma. And so it's very difficult for us to let go of that model, that it seemed to work so well. But what's changed is 40% of the workforce now has a college degree. Back, say, when I was a college student in the 70s, it was more like 25%. So there's, again, basic economics, supply and demand. If there's scarcity, then you can charge a higher premium, the higher price. If there's an abundance and overabundance, then the price drops. And so that's the same thing that's at work in the labor force. The number of people with college degrees, there's an abundance. There's no shortage of people with college degrees. Even PhDs are in oversupply. So the value that's paid to that labor will drop, just like any other economic situation. So the value of a college degree has plummeted as half the population attends college now.
So for me, I've got a 17-year-old who, I know everything we were talking about. I understand it. I recognize it from an intellectual level. But I also take that statistic, 40% of the workforce, right, has college degrees. Mm-hmm. And, when I counsel my son, I think to myself, well, I want him to have every advantage out there. And if he's one of the 60% that doesn't have a college degree, then he's at a disadvantage.
Yes.
So help me with my conflict. Help me with my thinking. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Right. And I think that that's the same situation that every parent in America faces. And I think that we don't have good choices right now. Like I said, we don't yet have a system that allows us to get an education for $4,000 or $5,000 for a degree instead of $40, $50, $100. But I think we need to draw a distinction between the employers in what I call the emerging economy, the parts of the economy that are growing fast, which is like digital software and the implementation of digital software in every industry in America, and the sort of conventional industries like, say, insurance or banking or retail, where the human resources departments are still tied into, like, the sort of what I call the passport stamp. Mm-hmm. Did you get your passport stamp, i.e. your 4-year college degree? So given that reality, I recommend to young people that they pursue a dual track. And this, of course, means you have to work twice as hard. But as somebody who did exactly what I'm proposing, I found it exciting. I didn't find it burdensome to basically pursue two different tracks at the same time. one track, get as many credits as you can at a local state school. You can start at the community college, get 60 credits or 2 years worth of credit for a relatively low cost, especially if you live at home or with a relative. Then transfer to a state school where the tuition is more like $6,000 to $7,000 a semester instead of 10 or 20. And if you the dual track is, then you choose a profession that you're going to work in that's growing in the real economy, and that can be anything from air conditioning and heating, which is a constant, to agriculture, to oil services. There's a ton of industries that are still doing well in the U.S. because they provide, basic fundamental things to the population, and then try to get a job, no matter how lowly, in that industry. And then if you can work in summers, you're getting valuable experience and you're saving money, so you don't really have to borrow. And so you're basically doing what you would do if you had a college degree, but you're not waiting for the degree. Because when you get the degree, that doesn't really give you much in today's world. You still got to go out and find mentors, find positions, and get job experience. And that's the hard part. Getting a 4-year degree is easy compared to, actually getting a job in the field you want to excel in.
Our guest today, Charles-Hugh-Smith, speaking on sacred cow of college and how to pay for it. This is Teresa Kuhn with Living Wealthy Radio. We'll be right back.
Living Wealthy Radio. Visit Teresa's team online at livingwealthyradio.com, 1-800-382-0830 now. Call 1-800-382-0830.
Welcome back, Austin, to Living Wealthy Radio with Teresa Kuhn.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Living Wealthy Radio, heard every Sunday at noon here on Talk Radio 1370 AM. Our system is broken, and finally more and more people are questioning why we have been living according to sacred cows, these conventional financial wisdom that ultimately fails us. We've got a new economy today. Today, our reality is very different than it was decades ago. So why are we so afraid to question and go against the grain? Is it too late to fix what's going on today? Charles-Hugh-Smith discussing with us college. And Charles, I'll say what I think about college, and I've got all sorts of degrees and believe in education, believe in learning, believe so much in critical thinking skills. But when I see the reality with my clients and their kids and the amount of debt, it's a mortgage that they've got on their shoulders, and looking at an economy that's not offering positions and jobs that they expected, right? I think the whole system is really a scam. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And as you say, with a sacred cow institution, people are appalled when the truth is stated baldly. But the higher education system has become a scam. And I think we need to mention the role of the federal government in this. And, of course, to your listeners, it'll be no surprise that one thread of the scam runs back to the government. And it's not a slam on all government or all government programs, but the federal government's role in this scam is huge. And we can look at the student loan growth as the main driver of these absurd costs. So who's backing all these student loans? Ultimately, it's the federal government.
It's the government.
Yeah.
And before we talk about that, one really great example, I don't know if you heard that there were law school graduates that were suing their law schools for overinflating job opportunities. Did you hear of that? This was several years ago.
Yeah, interesting.
And so that, to me, when that came out several years ago, I thought, how appropriate, right? We've got all these law schools with all these students that, law school is very expensive. It's 3 years. And law school does a great job at promoting the profession and promoting employment opportunities, right? I mean, I'm graduated from law school. I practice law. I recognized this many, many years ago when I went to school. And many of these graduates have over $100,000 in loans. And so to have a good paying job, it justifies the loans, right? And so law school does a great job at promoting the employment opportunities. Well, this group of law students, I think it was the school in California. I don't want to say because I'm going by memory, but I think there were actually many schools where the students stood up and said, all right, this is a scam. We've got our degrees, we've got our debt, we can't find jobs. And I think you're right regarding the government. The government has made the money too easy for these students to borrow, and they're complicit, if not responsible, for a lot of this problem.
Yeah, and the numbers are just staggering, Teresa. I have a chart on my website that's drawn directly from the Federal Reserve in St. Louis, which publishes hundreds of charts of various economic indicators. And the federal direct loans to students from the federal government have skyrocketed from, say, $100 billion to $600 billion in a few years. In other words, as student defaults are rising, what the federal government is doing is it's becoming the lender of last resort to keep the current system afloat. And, what's really scandalous is, you mentioned one of the scandalous features, which is inflating the supposed job opportunities from getting a degree. And the other inflated number is the number of our graduates who have a job now. That's another thing that many schools will promote the idea that 98% of our graduates have jobs, but what they don't break out is whether the person that's got a job, whether they're underemployed. So you have a sort of brewing scandal where people with PhDs supposedly have a very low unemployment rate, but how many of them are working in positions that required a PhD? It turns out that number is a lot lower. And there's a huge oversupply of people with PhDs in a number of fields. So getting a law degree that used to be 20 years ago, you'd get a guaranteed job offer. Now, I've read numbers that said up to 40% of law graduates are still unemployed a year after they graduated with a law degree.
And those that do take jobs are taking jobs where they're paying almost minimum wage, a little above minimum wage. And they've got these huge student loans that they can't pay with what they're making. And there was another statistic I read, and I'm going to make up the number because I can't remember exactly, but there are like 75,000 theater art graduates a year. Well, are there 75,000 new jobs available for these graduates every year? I don't know a whole lot about theater arts, but I've got to say, probably not.
That's an excellent point, Teresa, that when we graduate tens of thousands of people in various fields, we do not automatically create positions in that field. And it's not just theater arts, but you can say the same thing about computer science or chemistry. Even the hard sciences have an oversupply now of people with masters and PhDs.
So what do you recommend to a student today? Do you have kids?
No, I don't. I only have, niece, nephew, and all my friends' kids.
Okay. Well, what do you recommend if you had a niece or nephew who was a junior in college, or junior in high school? I've got a junior. I've got a 17-year-old son, right? And I'm completely conflicted as to, how to guide him. I'm all about community college. At one point in my life, I was a snob about schools. I no longer am. I see it for what it is, right? So I'm on the track where, hey, community college, get your first 2 years really cheap, and then you can go to a state school and get that diploma, get that piece of paper, right? At least you'll be in line with the 40%, and we're not paying tens of thousands of dollars. I'd rather give him a check to go start a business than give it to a university, right? But what would you recommend to your nephew who's a junior in high school?
Right. Well, I think it's interesting. As a starting point, you mentioned funding an entrepreneurial, creating your own job with the same money that would have been squandered on a essentially useless degree. And I believe there was quite a bit of media coverage about one of the Silicon Valley tech guys who did exactly that. He was recruiting high school students and saying, I will fund your first business to the tune of $50,000 instead of you going to college. Just start your business right now. And so I think that may be extreme for most people, but I think that the point is valid, which is we are in a very entrepreneurial economy where...
You think?
I think that the opportunities for entrepreneurism are rising because of the web, the internet, and the explosion of really powerful tools like 3D printing in terms of fabrication of parts and also just the ability to reach customers, potential customers through the web. So that's another complete and total failure of our current system, is teaching the rudimentary fundamentals of entrepreneurism. And I've started a number of businesses, everything from I've been a builder, and I do have a bachelor's degree in philosophy, but I basically earned that degree while I was working as a carpenter. And of course, you have to juggle your schedule, and you need an employer who will give you a little flexibility. And you have to work like 6-7 days a week. But it is possible. And of course, the more challenging the economy, the harder we have to work, all of us. And so what I would suggest to my nephew is, choose a field that's actually growing in the real economy. And theater arts probably isn't going to make the cut. And my degree's in philosophy, okay? There's the job growth there, sorry, not there. If you want to get that degree, that's fine, but consider it a side project to your fundamental project, which is mastering something that's useful in the real economy, solving somebody's problem. That's what we get paid for. So that's what I would say, dual track. Find out what you want to do, learn and master the skills that allow you to problem solve, and then go ahead and go to classes and earn credits kind of as a side project.
Well, I actually love philosophy degrees because it teaches you to think, and we need critical thinking skills. But you're right, the practical application of, having you put on your resume that you've got a philosophy degree, that's not one that most employers would say, oh, I've got a job for him, right?
Exactly.
So that's the other part of it. So the skills for the future, technical, engineering, finance, what do you think?
All of the above, and I think that the one real skill that I think the current system just sort of assumes that we gain through osmosis or by magic is learning how to learn. And we all go, oh, well, we all know how to learn. You don't have to really learn how to learn. We all know that because we're curious animals and our brains are wired to learn. Well, that's true. But nonetheless, the key feature of what I call the emerging economy, the economy that's the future, is we constantly have to keep learning within our fields. And, the old system was based on you get a college degree in a field, and there's not really going to be a whole lot of change in that field because change was at a slower pace in the decades gone by. And so you might have to take a little bit of professional coursework here and there, but that economy's gone. I mean, except for a few professions such as like maybe firefighters, police officers, and certain other government functions where the job and the work is roughly the same as it was 20 years ago. Even in those fields, technology is advancing rapidly that somebody in those jobs has to keep up with the advancements in their field. Well, outside of those sort of government sectors, many of us have to switch entire professions every few years, or we have to learn a whole new body of knowledge. And so that's really the critical thinking and the ability to learn entire new fields in depth. Those are the skills that everybody needs going forward.
You mentioned, as if you go to college, ideally you'd run two tracks. You'd have a day job, so to speak, and learn a trade and start getting experience, and then taking the credits and getting your degree. I've got an employee who does just that, and she does work 7 days a week, and she is just an inspiration to my husband and me, because she works so darn hard and she's so good at what she does. But really, I think she's the exception to the rule. I don't know how many students out there or how many people out there are willing to, work their day job and go to school and, keep up with their credits and their homework. But that would be ideal. I worked during school. When I got my degree, I had years of experience, and finding a job was never a problem for me. But I don't, let's talk about this generation, this new generation coming up. What are your thoughts regarding their mindset?
Well, that just as I have to say right off the bat, I'm just an observer. I do live in a college town, and of course, Austin is a huge college town, so I know that there's a great many students in the Austin area, and of course, that means competition for part-time jobs is really high. But I think we need to say that there's a tremendous number of really smart, really motivated young people out there. And as evidence, you can just look at the number of applications that are tendered to the top universities, and the number of people who get turned down, even though they have like really great SAT scores and really high grade point averages, and so we have like almost a surplus, if you will, of really bright, motivated kids, not all of whom can get into Yale, Stanford, etc. And that's a shame, really, because I think that there's many more qualified students than slots. So beyond that sort of top 10%, shall we say, of really smart, highly motivated, academically successful students, I think I'm hoping perhaps, but I do see evidence that there's a willingness to experiment in the younger generation, the generation that's either entering college or in college. And I think that's extremely hopeful, because the old model's broken, so just sticking with it is going to guarantee failure, essentially. And so, and it may just be on the fringes at this point, but that's how social change works, as we both know. The Pareto principle tells us that once 4% of a population grasp an idea and start living it, they start influencing the majority. So that's my hopeful observation of the young generation.
And I actually see those that apply to those, Ivy League schools who don't get accepted. I see that as a blessing, because those schools, the tuition is $50,000, $60,000 a year, and those are the ones walking away with this. Well, not the only ones, but they're walking away with huge amounts of debt. And in our economy today, with the way things are going, they may not be able to get jobs that's going to help pay their student loans.
Right. The real creme de la creme universities like Harvard and so on, they tend to provide almost 100% financial support to students from needy families or lower income families. But we have to be realistic. I mean, these are a few thousand people in these elite universities, and we're talking about an economy, with 320 million people and a workforce of 140 million. So, I think it's important to have sort of a priority list of A, B, C, D, or at least three alternatives for every potential college student, like, okay, go ahead and apply to the best school you can with the full financial aid thing. And if you get 95% of your expenses paid for by grants, great, go. But that's a rarity.
It is rare.
Yeah, and so that's something that you can aim for that and shoot for that. But if it doesn't work, then you've got to have Plan B. And then if Plan B is not is too expensive, then you've got to have Plan C.
So you've got the very rich who can write the check with no problem, and then you've got the very poor that these universities will assist with tuition. It's the middle class, which is basically my clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their child gets accepted into MIT or Harvard or Yale, and they will break their back and take on the debt just so Johnny can go to MIT.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the ones that are stuck in that, how can I say no to my child, right, to go to the school? I'll do whatever it takes. I'll take on the debt. I'll do whatever, right? And they're the ones that are burdened with this tremendous amount of debt. And, you write frequently about debt and often use the term debt surf, which I love. It's what we've become, right? We've become the society of debt serfs. And the answer is probably obvious, but why do you think debt is so destructive for our nation and for households?
I think we can start with the idea that we're substituting debt for working smarter, better, and more productively. And if we look at the economy, just for example, it's grown by, 60% over the last 25 years. Well, our debt has grown by 400%. And our federal debt's grown by 600%. So instead of working smarter and more productively and really kind of bearing down and saying, what do we need to do to change, to adapt to the new realities, instead we just go borrow a bunch more money. And we paper over all the problems with this flood of borrowed money. And that's really what's happened in higher education. Instead of saying, well, why are colleges failing to produce students who, with critical thinking skills? How have colleges fallen out of alignment with the real economy? Instead, we just loan, these poor kids like $80,000, $100,000 and say, we'll just get this degree and everything will be fine. We've failed completely and utterly, but we've been able to do so because we've relied on debt to kind of paper over our inadequacies as a nation and as a house at the household level.
What are your thoughts regarding the economy?
Positive thoughts or negative thoughts?
Realistic for today.
Realistically, I think that we're in the midst of a revolution that's analogous to the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s. And we're in sort of at the beginning stages, and so it's hard for us to discern the future, just as it was difficult for people coming off the farm in 1840 to foresee the industrialized economy of 1880. And so I think we're in a really fast-changing transitional period in the U.S. economy and in the global economy, where all the benefits are going to people who are flexible, can learn fast, and are entrepreneurial. And those that are being left behind are those that aren't willing or are unable to learn new stuff and are unwilling to enter the sort of entrepreneurial spirit where you try something, it doesn't work, you let go of it and move on. And you seek to collaborate with professional people who are succeeding in the field that you want to enter, and that kind of stuff. And so the sort of old model was you get a job and stick there for 30 or 40 years, and then you get your retirement and so on. That model's breaking down on multiple levels, but it doesn't mean that we have to give up and say, our economy's going to crumble or our society has failed. It just means we have to grasp the fact that we're going to have to remain adaptable and flexible because the future's changing fast, and we can't really make decisions now that are going to be valid in 10 years even. We can only act on what we know now and anticipate that change will perhaps even speed up.
What about for the baby boomers?
Baby boomers. Well, it ties into our discussion of higher education because many of my friends are in precisely the same boat that you described. They've worked hard. They have college degrees themselves. Their bills for health care and college far outstrip the amount of money they can put away for their own retirement. So they own almost nothing. And their own retirement is based on a 401k or, from corporate America or Social Security. And so they're in a bind. They've got elderly parents to pay for, and they've got kids to try to get into college. And they just, it seems that many baby boomers are going to retire without the assets that they hoped for. Does that align with what you're seeing from your client base?
Oh, absolutely. And so what I teach my clients to do is to build their savings on a foundation that is so rock solid that no matter what happens with Wall Street, no matter what happens with real estate, that at least the savings, the amount of savings that they can put away is not at risk. And once they've got that foundation in place, if they want to go out and gamble and risk money on Wall Street, then it's okay to do that. But what I find, when you put, pencil to paper and start doing the math, you recognize, or my clients do, they really shouldn't be risking a whole lot of money on a system, like Wall Street, where somebody's pushing the buttons and we don't know who it is, right? But it's certainly not there for the benefit of the investors or the consumers.
You raised 2 points in that commentary, I think, which are worth emphasizing, which is the yield on investment, and the other is opportunity cost. And so whether we're talking about starting a company or retiring or trying to get a child into college and pay for it with cash, we're talking about the yield on an investment. And so when we were talking about higher education, what we were really saying is the yield on that huge investment is declining. And it's declining so fast, we're not even sure what it is anymore. Because having a college degree certainly doesn't guarantee a good job anymore. And there's apparently no guarantee that a child that goes through college is going to exit with critical thinking skills. And I think the other point that you raise here is the opportunity cost. That's the term for what else could we have done with the money.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we risk money in the Wall Street casino, then of course we're opening ourselves up to huge losses if the various bubbles in bonds, stocks, and real estate pop. But it also goes back to your comment about what could we do with the money that we're now spending on college. What else could we do for our child with that money? What other business could we purchase with the money that we're investing in college with such a poor return?
Mm-hmm. Now, what you mentioned, the yield, the opportunity cost, those are terms I use in my practice every single day in guiding my clients to think differently because, here in America, we're brainwashed. I think in many, many ways, we're programmed to think in terms of, those sacred cows, the 401ks, Wall Street, college. That's the only way, right, that we can have a bright future and all our dreams will come true. And, I'm hopeful, and what I've seen in my experience, and Charles, I think you have too, more and more people are waking up to the reality that it's not true, right? We've been lied to. Charles, thank you so much for spending time with us today. You're a great thinker. I love your website. And you've got a lot to offer in terms of, alternative ways of looking at what's going on. Your website is of2minds.com. We will have a link to your website on Living Wealthy Radio. You've got a number of books that I think our listeners would love, could certainly benefit from reading. Any last thoughts or comments?
I've really enjoyed our discussion on higher education, and I hope it opens some doors for listeners to alternatives to, as you say, the sacred cows.
Fantastic. Well, listen, God bless. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. Take good care.
Thank you, Teresa.
This presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. The info being presented does not consider your particular financial objectives or situation and does not make personalized recommendations. This material is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified tax advisor or legal counsel or other professional, and you should not use the information in place of a personal consultation regarding your specific situation or needs prior to taking any action based on this information. We believe the info provided is reliable, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, timeliness, or completeness.